So welcome to the Story of Life, episode 3. And this one's a little bit different. You probably hear some crickets, some birds. You might eventually hear a car drive by. I'm sitting outside, and I'm outside by the graves of all 3 of my dogs. But that's not what today's story is about. It's just one of those things you just have a memory of, and you figure, I think this story might be important to share for whoever needs to hear it. Now, some of you everybody will take something different from this story. Even I don't know exactly what happened here. But it's a story that shows how far back in our own lives things can have an effect on where we're at now. Now, to rewind my current situation really quick, I'm here by the graves of my 3 dogs. I'm here outside my big house, right by the river, where I had plenty of time to spend with my 3 dogs. Now, the reason why I mention that is because I've been manifesting that for decades. Decades and decades. And I got exactly what I wanted. I did not get it the way that anybody would have wanted to draw the map to getting it. That's for sure. If when I set the intention, had I been shown the map to how I was going to get to what I want, I would have laughed and said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing that. But I got what I wanted anyway. So, okay. So we'll put that aside over here. There's a reason why that's important. Now, when I was 5, the movie Jaws came out. And my father, in his infinite wisdom, and I say that sarcastically because I would have done the same exact thing. He thought, hey, this would be a fun movie to take my 5-year-old to, Jaws. Yeah. So you can imagine how that went. It went exactly as you would think it would go. Apparently, for months, I wouldn't even take a bath because I thought Jaws was going to come up through the drain. And as a kid, we had a swimming pool in the backyard. And I would swim in the pool from the shallow end to the deep end, no problem. But the deep end had the drain on the very bottom. And on the way back from the deep end to the shallow end, I swam faster than fast. I was Lightning McQueen in water because Jaws was going to come up through the drain and get me. Now that fear lasted all the way to maybe 13, 14 years old. I mean, this is some serious stuff. You know, a 14-year-old thinking Jaws is going to come up through the pool drain. Now, in terms of getting into the real water, forget about it. I go fishing all the time with my dad, and if we ever ended up on the surf fishing, man, if my ankles got hit by the water, Jaws is going to get me. My whole existence around water, anytime I was getting into water anywhere, the voices in my head would say, Jaws is waiting for you. Jaws is waiting for you. Don't go out there. Jaws is waiting for you. Now, as an aside, the swimming from the deep end of the pool to the shallow end of the pool so fast actually paid dividends for me. When I went into the United States Air Force and I was 18, the first summer I was there, I saw that they were having swim team tryouts. Now, I'm not a tall guy, and I'm bulky too, especially back then. I'm 5'6", and by the time I was trying out for the swim team, I was over 200 pounds. Solid rock muscle, I was a bodybuilder, and free food. So you can imagine, free food and free gym, I turned into a beast. But showed up for these the swim team tryouts, and the guys just kind of looked at me because everybody else is 6'2", 6'3", they're slim, they've got swimmer's builds. And they looked at me and they're like, bro, are you sure you're in the right place? I'm like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about me. I got me. You worry about you. Long story short, they put me on the front end. It was a 4-man relay, and they put me in the first leg because for those first 50 yards, ain't none of them could swim as fast as I could swim because I had been speed swimming since about the age of 6 in my pool because Jaws was going to get me. So that was a unintended benefit of that trauma. So as the years went on, nothing ever changed. Never crossed my mind to even think about getting over the fear of the water. And while at the same time, I knew that I wanted this thing. I wanted this big house by the river so I could spend time with the dogs and the dogs could, play in the water. And then I never put A and B together about, well, I mean, you think Jaws is in a puddle. I'm a grown-ass man thinking, I don't care where I'm getting in the water. I'm worried about sharks. And look, I grew up in Florida, right? So if there wasn't alligators, there's sharks in that intercoastal waterway. Those bull sharks will get anywhere. So, in fact, I remember one time as a young man, I might have been late 20s, early 30s, I remember hearing a story about a gentleman who had a house on the Indian River. And every morning he would jump off of his dock and go for his morning swim. And one morning he jumped off of his dock into the mouth of a 6-foot bull shark, and his wife stood there and watched him get chewed up and killed in the Indian River. Very brackish water. So I was never all that far removed from sharks enough to even think about trying to get over the fear, let alone getting over the fear. And then something happened that changed so many things in my life. I went to massage school. And now how did that help you get over your fear of sharks? Well, it starts like this. When I went to massage school, I was a 37-year-old man. There were 20 people in the class, give or take. It was me. There was an older guy who was probably in his 50s. There was one more guy who was about my age. And then the rest of the class was girls between the ages of 18 to 21. Yeah. So it was difficult in as many ways as you can imagine. But what had happened was, one of the days we had a, quote, spa day. And what we were learning to do was like mix salt scrubs and essential oils and everything. And because we didn't want to have all that fragrance, too many essential oils and everything, we didn't want that all to be in the classroom. The teacher decided to hold the class that day at the beach. And so we're out there, and we're all out there, and let's just say the girls in their bikinis and us guys are in our t-shirts, and there's a bunch of massage tables lined up on the beach, and of course passerbys are coming up and saying, hey, what's going on here? It was an interesting day, but as the day got on and it got warmer and, people started going into the water, and by people, I mean the 20-year-olds in the bikinis, I decided, well, this sucks. And I was able to get in almost to like half my shin, like not my knee. Like if the little wave lapped up and touched my knee, I was backing up. I wasn't real vocal about my fear of sharks. And luckily, it was low tide, so I tried to make do with as best with the situation as I could. I wasn't going to be the old man standing on the beach with 15, 20-year-old girls saying, come on, don't be chicken, come in the water. That wasn't going to be me that day. And now that's not what got me over the fear, but that's what got me to start thinking, maybe I should get over this fear. This is kind of stupid, because the other two guys were just out there swimming. And so After I graduated massage school and I started carrying around my table because I was doing house calls, and a lot of the clients I had were beachside. And so what I did was, if I had a couple of massages on the beach, instead of going straight home, I would grab my boogie board and start learning how to boogie board as a way to get comfortable in the water. Now, how did I just suddenly decide, okay, I'm going to be okay in this water? Well, it's hard to describe. If you've ever had a fear that's held you back and then you've eventually gotten over it, I think that, however you would want to word it, but I think where the journey began to getting over it was just saying to yourself, you know what, fuck this. Okay? I mean, there's no magic way to begin. There's no magic way to start. You as your own person have to hit that moment where you're just like, I have had enough of this bullshit. And that's where I got. And so, I started learning how to boogie board, and the first year I could get, about almost knee high. And then I spent another year or two comfortable getting knee high. And then I spent another year getting comfortable being waist high. But when you're boogie boarding, when you want to catch a wave being waist high, the water's almost a little bit too high for you to really jump up, at least for me. So I was comfortable being waist high, but I didn't need to be waist high. But how I did it was, to put not too fine a point on it, anything that came my way that I was going to be afraid of, I would just look at and say, fuck you. Because, if you have a fear of the water, the ocean especially, you could be in ankle deep water, but if a piece of seaweed rubs up against your foot, you're running. And that would happen to me, and that's how I had to start getting used to things. If a piece of seaweed came up, fuck you. If a little, 6-inch bait fish came around and swam around my foot, fuck you. Sounds stupid, but it worked. So this went on for about 3, maybe 4 years. And then this one day I was at the beach. Now remember, the entire time, I should set some context here. The entire time growing up, like I said, anytime I would go into the water, little voices would say, Jaws is going to get you, don't go out there. Jaws is waiting for you, Jaws is waiting for you. And even when I was learning how to boogie board and I would see the surfers, they would go out there, and those were the real guys, right? And girls. But that same little voice in the back of my head was, don't go out there. Don't go out there. Jaws is waiting for you. Jaws is going to get you. Jaws is waiting for you. So this one day comes after I've gotten plenty comfortable with being in the water, even waist high. Might have been a couple of times I even got chest high, but wasn't much to do there from boogie board, and I couldn't catch a wave there. So this summer day, I'm kind of there by myself, and all of a sudden a crew of maybe 8, 10 kids come up, college age. And they got their surfboards, and they just walk right past me with their boards, and they paddle out to where, as I would put it, where the surfers go. And I just sat there, and that little voice that was saying, Jaws is going to get you, Jaws is waiting for you, that little voice wasn't there anymore. At least not then. I just kind of looked at them, and I looked at my boogie board, and I looked at them, and I'm looking at these kids. And these are 19-year-old kids. They're 140 pounds soaking wet. And I'm sitting here, a grown-ass man, afraid. You know what? I had enough of this bullshit. I've had enough of this bullshit. There is no reason why I cannot go out there, get on my boogie board. Ain't no sharks. Look, there's 10 of them out there. There's 10 people out there. They're all having a good time. Fuck this. And so, that's what I did. I got my ass up. And I went out there where the surfers are. And I knew I wasn't really going to be able to catch a wave on the boogie board. And I was still standing in water that I could stand, but it was pretty much neck deep. Doesn't get that deep out here. But, you know, the water was 5 foot deep. You know, anything can be in 5 feet of water. So I stood there and I tried to catch a wave a couple of times. But this was more about just being free of that fear. And I'm looking to the left, not really any waves. And look over to the right, not really any waves. Look back to the left, look back to my right. And as I look back to my right, about 40 feet away, there was a really big dark shadow. Long dark shadow headed right for me. And I looked at it, and I'm like, fuck you. No, fuck you. You're not there. You don't exist. You are a figment of my imagination. I am not going to sit here and panic over that, because that is my imagination. That is nothing. Except it wasn't nothing. Before I knew it, I'd got knocked off of my feet, completely flown out of the water, did a complete 180, and landed back on my feet once I could get my bearings of where I was and what had happened. And then when I looked, there went that long shadow, only now it was to the left of me. And just at the tippy top of the water, I could see the fin. And I just kind of stood there. And I replayed the incident in my mind 100 times inside of 10 seconds. And I just rewound it. And I fast forwarded it. And I played it. And I stood there and I realized, well, Jaws was waiting for me. This son of a bitch was waiting for me. By the size of the shadow, solid 6-foot shark. Solid 6-foot shark. Fat, too. And he had just slammed into my hip and knocked my ass right out of the water so violently that I just basically, my feet went out of the water and my feet went back in the water. I just did a complete 180. And so I didn't want to panic. Surfers were there. They didn't know anything. You know, it wasn't, I didn't scream or anything, so nobody would have known. I wasn't that close to them. So I walked in, and I just stood there right where the sand meets the water, kind of leaning on my board a little bit. And I'm just incredulous. I'm just like, did that just happen? That had happened. He was waiting for me. The damn shark. My whole entire life, that little voice in my head had been telling me, don't go out there, Jaws is waiting for you. And the son of a bitch was. And then, as if to just make sure that I wasn't imagining things, you know, just to make sure that what I think just happened actually did just happen. I stood there and I thought about it, and I said, you know, if I don't get back in the water now, I'm never going to get back in. If I just go sit in my towel and then go home and don't get back in the water, I'm never going to get back in the water. I said, okay. So I made up my mind to get back in. I reached down to grab my board, but also to look at my leg because it felt a little weird. And running down my left calf was a bunch of blood. And from what I figure, from what I, you know, could remember and what must have happened, as he bumped me, and then I flipped over, and as I was coming back down, and if he gave his back tail a nice little swish to get away from me, he sliced up my calf pretty nice. Like right on the edge of the bone. Had a nice little slice. It was very thin. I don't have much of a scar. But I had blood running down my leg. And I'm standing there and I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, this hardly qualifies as a shark attack. And certainly, whether it was a 6-foot bull shark or spinner or black tape, whatever it wasn't Jaws, right? You know, there's a lot of bull sharks where I was, but there's also, you know, spinners, but that's not the point. The whole time, that little voice was telling me, don't go out there, Jaws is waiting for you. And it's pretty much accurate. It's pretty much accurate. And so I went and I sat down on my towel and I waited for the blood to dry. I knew I was going back in. Now I definitely knew I was going back in. But I wasn't going to go back in with my leg bleeding. So I went and sat down and, you know, blotted it dry and just let it, you know, congeal over enough to where I felt comfortable getting back in the water. I wasn't going to be, you know, chumming up for another shark. And I got back in, and you know, that fear was gone. The fear was gone. The fuck you turned into whatever. It just kind of turned into whatever. And so you could talk about, well, did I manifest it? Or was I genuinely being warned about it? Who knows? Right? I mean, that can only be decided really by me. I mean, and I don't mean that like you're not entitled to your own opinion, but what I mean is whoever has the experience is the one that can decide, you know, what that lesson was about. I mean, it wasn't my choice to go see Jaws, right? But just like the fear of the shark had led to me being such a fast swimmer, the other thing that it led to was when I finally moved here and I had the big house by the river with the dogs, I didn't have any fear of getting in the water. I just walk right in, and if I'm up to my chest, wherever I am, I don't even, the fear is gone. There's no fear. Now, what's interesting is anytime over the course of the last 9 years while I've been in the river, and I've been there with the dogs, and I've even gotten a little bit of like a, you know, a flash of being concerned about, you know, something being in the water with me. That same voice that told me that Jaws was out there waiting for me has a very specific story for me, and I only mention it here because if it ever happens, I want a record of me having mentioned it. But that same voice that told me Jaws was waiting for me would tell me I'm safe here in the river with the dogs, but one day after they die, I might have an experience with a shark while I'm in my kayak in the bay. It seems oddly specific. I live in Maryland, for those of you who don't know, so the river is just a tributary of the Chesapeake Bay, and the bay is about a mile down the road. So that's not, you know, that's very possible that could happen. But what's interesting about it is that I welcome that now. Like all those years, Jaws is coming to get you, don't go out there, that it caused me fear. But since the incident, can't really call it a shark attack, right? You know, I got bumped. I got knocked on my ass, and I got cut. But It wasn't by his teeth. But now when I think about, well, if I'm out there in my kayak and I have an experience with the shark, I'm not afraid. I don't quite know if my attitude is bring it on, because I don't want to manifest it that way, going, come on, let's do this. I don't know that that's exactly the attitude I want to have, but it's pretty close to how I feel about it. There's a movie, I think it's Up. The old man, multiple times in that movie, he says, what more can you do to me? Yeah, well, in the last 6 months, both of my last two dogs have died. My relationship ended. The family cat died. And a couple of days ago, my second mother, my brother from another mother's mother, passed. So it hasn't been 1 month in the last 6 months where I haven't had a bunch of loss. And so when I think about being on my kayak in the bay, if a shark wants to have a dance, let's go. What more can you do to me? Oh, I mean, they could, right? A bull shark could take my leg. That would screw up my day. And I don't have a fear of death by shark anymore, because I don't think that was the purpose for the fear. The purpose for the fear, I suppose, was so that I'd be comfortable in the river water when I got what I asked for. And, it's just a tributary of the Chesapeake Bay, like I said. I mean, I've never seen nor heard of any sharks that came into the river, but I'm sure at some point in time, a shark or two would have wandered in. It's just mathematically impossible for it to not have happened. I remember one time, this was a few years ago, just out of nowhere, I don't even know what happened. The YouTube algorithm just started bringing me videos about, look at this shark, it was in the river. I was like, will you shut up? I don't want to see that shit. It's funny how that all happens. But to think back to whatever motivated my dad to take me to see Jaws at that age led to the fear, which led to so many different experiences so that I could get over the fear, so that I would be comfortable in the water that I wanted to be in with my dogs throughout the last, 9 years of their lives. It's crazy to think how far back things are being set up for you. In the first episode, in the first Story of Life episode, I tell the story about how Fluffy, my St. Bernard, came to me, and the path that the universe used to get him to me. And it for sure is something that I would have not chosen. Not then. But now, as I'm getting older and the beard gets whiter, you start to realize that the majority of the time, when you look back at these, in quotes, bad things that happened to you, at some point down the road, you say, wow, that had to happen. The only reason I have this positive thing in my hand right now is because of that horrible thing that I had to go through, however long ago it was. Now, being aware of that, being conscious of that, doesn't necessarily help. And what I mean is that what I just laid out for you, the loss that I have had in the last 5-6 months, it's like, whoa, I can't. It's hard to sit here and think in a year from now or in 2 years from now, you're going to be going, I'm going to be feeling that this was a good thing. My dog's dying? How am I going to think that's a good thing? Except that's literally the first episode. A dog passed, and it ended up being the result that came from that ended up being something significantly positive in my life. So even now, when I think about everything I've gone through in these last months, I mean, I'm mourn and I'm sad and all of the things. There's some songs I just cannot listen to at this point. But everything about my life so far tells me that at some point I will look back on this time now and say, I didn't see how that was going to work out, but holy crap, all this positivity and this great thing that I have in my hand now is only because of the things that happened back then. But the hard part, when you know that, when you've lived it and you say, okay, I know this music, this is something terrible, which means something good is coming. Well, that's only half the battle. The other half of the battle is waiting. Waiting. See, when I was watching Jaws, or when I was getting over that fear of the shark, I wasn't even consciously thinking that this is going to benefit me sometime down the road. I was only doing what I needed to do for myself in the moment. And, the time between when I saw Jaws at 5 and got over the fear at 40 was 35 years. The time between when I got over the fear and I was standing in the river with the dogs without the fear was about another 5 to 6 years. And at no point during either of those journeys was I conscious or waiting, or conscious of waiting for, okay, that was a bad thing. Here comes the good. Where's the good? So the awareness has not made it any easier, because now I sit here and I look at my watch and I'm like, that good thing could come anytime now, right? Y'all gonna send the good thing, like we're coming today, right? We're coming today, right? It's like I would like to be able to pay my bills. Hello? Is there anybody home? Anybody? Crickets. Crickets. Absolute crickets. But when I look back at the times that I just talked about, the 35 years in between Jaws and getting over the fear, and the 5-6 years in between getting over the fear and being in the river with the dogs, at no point was I standing there looking at my watch going, okay, let's go with the good thing, because I wasn't really that aware. Now I am. That makes it a lot harder. Because now I'm consciously aware of, okay, I mean, both dogs and my girlfriend gone. It's like, I am 100% aware that the universe has cleared the decks, but how long am I waiting for whatever they cleared the decks for to show up? There was one time I waited 35 years, the next time I waited 5 or 6 years. Sometimes it feels like I won't survive waiting, because now I know that I'm waiting for something. It was almost better when I was unaware. I think that's why people that consider themselves spiritual or awake, I think that's why sometimes it feels like things are more difficult. Because once you become aware, awareness is not a cure to pain. In fact, it's an accentuator, to be honest, because when bad times come, you're half dealing with the emotions of the trauma, while the other half you knows that, okay, that means something good is going to come. And that messes with your mourning process, right? It's like, how can I sit here and mourn for the dogs while at the same time saying, well, I know something good is going to come of them passing. That's crazy making. So, what's left? The biggest fear in my life was the shark. I had the experience of that. Apparently, I have another experience coming. I have no reason to doubt that that would happen. Now, I could avoid that experience. I could just simply never go in my kayak in the bay. But I have a feeling that if I tried to avoid that experience by staying in the river, that would be the one day that the one shark just happened to mosey on into the river and accidentally tip my kayak over. I have zero confidence that I can hide from that. Like I said, it wasn't my decision to go see Jaws. I was 5. I don't know what comes next. I know that it seems as though the more clarity I ask for, the foggier things get. Sometimes the universe or God is only going to be there to support your decisions. They're not going to be there to shine a light on which decision you should make. Now, I suppose if you approach it from the attitude of you're going to be supported no matter what decision you make, that can help. Sure. That's it. I don't know whether the fear of the shark manifested the shark or if it was a genuine warning from all that way back then. How could anybody know? We could have an opinion, right? If you believe in manifesting, you probably believe I manifested the shark. I got no argument there. If you believe that everything is energy and we can, know things before we're supposed to know them, and maybe that was just a warning. But what's interesting is the day that I went out there and got bumped by that shark, that voice was not there telling me, don't go out there. Jaws is waiting for you. That voice was gone. Never came back, too. Well, it did, but it was years later here in the river telling me, don't worry, you're safe in the river. But after the dogs die, if you get on your kayak and go to the bay, you might have an experience. That's all they'll call it, is an experience. And experience can mean anything, right? I don't know if there's basking sharks in the Chesapeake Bay. I don't know. But that would be an experience, right? Those things are huge. They're not dangerous. Or maybe I'm just reeling in a fish and a giant bull shark, comes right up to the boat, steals my fish, and then takes off. Maybe that's the experience. Or maybe a jet skier runs by, tips me over, tips me into the water, and right into the mouth of a shark. Who knows? Who knows? But the fear is gone. The fear is gone. That's it. If you'd enjoy this episode, please do hit the subscribe button. If you have not listened to episode 1 and episode 2, I highly recommend both, but especially episode 1, especially if you're into stories about fear and bad things turning into good things. That one's a doozy. That's it. Hopefully I can get episode out 4 in a little bit of a quicker time than I've managed in between these episodes. We're getting there. We're getting there.